Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Hybrid Fitness Report. My name is Paul Reynolds.
I'm Jude Reynolds.
And we're looking forward to getting into our second chat about all things hybrid fitness. In particular today, we're going to be focusing on what is it? What does that mean? What isn't it? Which will be part of the conversation and what goes into it. We have a couple of things I want to catch up on though, Jude, from the last episode. First of all, I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you, or a bit of a clarification to ask of you, because you said, of you, yes, because you said to me when we were talking about the WOW, the acid bath, which we'll be talking about later, you said, in terms of thinking, what time should I be doing? You said, for someone who's aged like you. And I'd said, what, badly? Yes. And you just let that slide. So I'm assuming you mean...
I clarified it later. I said something about, I don't really know. I can't really justify it.
Did you mean I've aged well, or did you mean I've aged badly?
You've aged well, but your fitness is not where it could be, is what I meant.
Okay.
You have shown in the past 2 years that you can get quite fit, but obviously because you don't have a solid goal in mind, or haven't until very recently, your fitness has dropped off a small cliff. So that's all I meant.
My fitness has dropped off a small cliff, and I've aged well, but badly. That's a really good answer. I like that.
Exactly.
So it's kind of insulting without me actually being able to properly take offence about it.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
well done.
I think I did pretty well.
The next thing is an error on my part. So you mentioned...
There we go.
On a separate issue, you mentioned lactic thresholds. And I don't.
Yes.
And maybe I'll ask you properly what that is at some point. You mentioned lactic thresholds. And then when I was repeating what you said, I said lactate thresholds. I've
actually had no one pull us up on that.
No, the first run through, I thought lactate threshold. I think that's probably where a new mum realizes that she really needs to start expressing right now. So,
yes, very different.
Very different. So let's get into our main feature. We've got a whole bunch of things lined up for today. So we want to talk about last week in workouts. We need to talk about nutrition. Have you got something you want to give us for that? And last week's WOW, which was painful, and then you'll be introducing this week's WOW, and then we'll finish off with quote of the week again, as we did last week, just a slightly less serious one. So let's get into the main thing, which is, what is hybrid fitness? Could you start off by giving us a 1 or 2 sentence definition, a working definition, and we'll work off that?
First of all, the definition is going to be subjective, depending on who you ask. For me, it is a sport that can use a combination of all the components of fitness to a high level. And in my view, High Rocks and quite a few of the hybrid sports that are currently quite popular do that to a high standard, so do that very well.
Okay, so what are the components of fitness? And so, Jude, if it's a combination of all the components of fitness, what are those components?
There's a quite widely recognized list of 10, being cardiovascular endurance, muscular strength, flexibility, agility, balance, coordination, power, speed, and reaction time. Okay.
And so how does that play into defining hybrid fitness? Because that sounds a little bit like it's everything up to a point, right? Every sport.
Yeah. For me, it would be a sport that combines them all at the highest level possible. So, for example, if you had a sport that, yes, you could argue used only 2 of which were prominent in High Rocks and in quite a few of the other ones like Hybrid Games, DECA, etc., you can draw each of those components of fitness quite strongly to the race. So it's not just, you could argue that probably you could find 10 of them if you looked hard enough. In High Rocks, it slaps you more in the face more than any other sport, in my opinion, that I know. Okay. So hybrid fitness for me, something that uses all of those components to a high level.
Let me tell you what ChatGPT said in answer to my question, what is hybrid fitness? Hybrid fitness...
His best friend, by the way.
It's an unreliable friend, but it doesn't answer back, so it's got that going for it. Hybrid fitness usually refers to, and this is kind of where ChatGPT falls down, because it does lean heavily towards what do I see most often coming up, and I'll treat that as gospel. But anyway, ChatGPT says, hybrid fitness usually refers to a training and competition style that blends endurance and strength in the same workout or event. Unlike pure bodybuilding or pure endurance sports, hybrid fitness athletes aim to be both strong and fast over longer durations, which to me still sounds a little bit like the 1,500 meters, the 3,000 steeplechase, to a lesser degree the marathon. They all sound like they're hybrid fitness, because whereas back in the day, a marathoner would go, well, I train by running. No, these days, a marathoner trains with a whole lot of squats and a whole lot of other things that you would say belong to hybrid fitness, right? So what's the difference?
What ChatGPT highlights there are the two most obvious components. So by its definition, power, endurance, and strength are some of the three most popular ones. And so on the surface level, that is what Hyrox is. But then if you dive deeper into the sport, you can see on the station like wall balls, for example, if you don't have good coordination, you're not going to be able to be even slightly competitive in the sport. You'll end up with a fitness and a muscular endurance level, say that is even on the elite side. If you don't have any coordination, you won't be able to catch the ball when it comes down to you from the target. You're going to take 6 minutes. That puts you out of contention. So there are parts in every station of Hyrox that require different parts here. Like, for example, flexibility. In burpees, if you don't have the flexibility to bring your hands to your feet, you're going to lose up on so much distance per burpee.
So
that
I'm
you're
just wincing at the word burpees. Carry on.
It's really just not going to put you in you're not going to be able to be super competitive if you don't have a good level of each of these components of fitness. Whereas in running, like you said, you have very high levels of some and traces of others, which is why I think if we're talking about hybrid fitness, Hyrox is a far more apt example than 1,500 meter race.
What's the bit that makes the difference with that, for as an example of how coordination helps?
Coordination, I'd say wall balls would be the station that requires it the most. But then if you look into other components like the flexibility, like I said, with the burpees, you're going to lose distance if you don't have that. With the agility, with the amount of turns that some of these events have, the rock zone as well. Like there were a couple of majors last year where you literally had 180-degree hairpin turns. If you don't have good agility, you're losing seconds every single turn. And even those seconds, again, on surface level, isn't that much. When you have to turn that same exact turn a couple of times every lap, that adds up. And on the elite side, which is what I was sort of referencing before, that's going to add up and that's going to put you out of contention on the podium, possibly even just through turns like that. With balance, that plays into that aspect as well. Being able to stay on your feet, being able to maintain a good posture while running, power, speed as well. Speed in Hyrox isn't super prominent, so that would be one of the ones where I'd say, sure, it's not a dominant component of fitness in the sport, but again, you can draw it from a little bit from every component there. Balance when you're running is so huge. The definition of running is landing and taking off of one foot. So by definition, you're working unilaterally, meaning one side at a time. You cannot be efficient in running without having good balance. Now, it's not something that you need to isolate in your training in terms of like as a necessity. So you don't see a whole load of people doing Bosu ball pistol squats, like one-legged squat off of a malleable ball. That's something that really helps with balance. You don't see people, a lot of the Elite 15 athletes doing a lot of balance work, but by definition, to be good and efficient at running, you need a good sense of balance. And that takes up 55%, as we know, of a Hyrox race, for example, 50% of a DECA race, all these sorts of very popular hybrid fitness sports. Running is the main component, at least of the ones that are popular right now.
So Jude, talk to us about how flexibility applies. So typically flexibility is something that one would think, well, unless I'm doing gymnastics or something very bendy, what's the relevance of flexibility to hybrid fitness specifically?
Talking about ones that I know most about, which would be Hyrox or hybrid games, stuff like that. Flexibility would be most prominent and most obvious in the station, like I mentioned earlier, burpees, because when you're doing a burpee, you want to do the least amount of reps as possible without expending a huge amount. So if you obviously don't want to do the least amount by jumping as far as you can every single time, because that's going to take a huge amount of energy to do.
So just to clarify, all the burpee stations aren't do X number of burpees. They are cover a specific distance, and therefore you want, the longer your burpee broad jump, the fewer you have to do to cover the distance, right? So these aren't burpees; these are burpee broad jumps we're talking about.
Yeah, burpee broad jumps. So you want to be able to, which is where you have to do a burpee. But instead of jumping up at the top, you step up to where your hands were coming up from the bottom, and then you do a broad jump after that and repeat the process. But how flexibility comes into that would just be if you leave space between your hands and your feet, like for example, when you step up into the burpee broad jump, if you do not step up into your feet and your feet fall behind your hands, you're going to be losing maybe say this much distance every single rep. And across 80 meters, if you're doing 80 reps, that little gap here where you could have made up that ground would now have been lost. And so you're essentially, instead of doing 80 reps, you're now doing 90 reps because your flexibility wasn't to the point where you could comfortably bring your feet up by this much further towards your hands.
So for those of you listening, not watching, this that Jude was referring to was what, 6-10 inches? Yeah. And how far do you have to cover in high rocks burpee broad jumps?
In high rocks, 80 meters.
You're looking at adding 20 meters worth of burpee broad jumps compared to what you could have to do if you were more flexible, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so the burpees aren't the only thing
Right.
in hybrid sports that require flexibility, but that's the most obvious one that sort of I felt like we would just touch on a little bit here.
Okay, do you want to talk about one more element of the components of fitness and how that applies to hybrid fitness as a sport or as a methodology?
The main ones are, the other ones are all the ones that are quite popular. So you've got muscular strength, muscular endurance, cardiovascular endurance, power. Namely, if you're thinking power, again, sleds. Sleds have become a huge part of hybrid fitness and have recently been introduced into the hybrid games, actually. And also, they are a part of metrics. They're a part of, obviously, high rocks. But a huge amount of hybrid sports use these sleds now, which require muscular endurance because it's not just 10 meters as quickly as you can. You need a lot of power because in order to go from a stationary position to being in a state of dynamicity, of moving, is dynamicity a word?
It is now. It's definitely a word.
It is now.
It wasn't before. It definitely wasn't before, but it is now.
State of dynamicity sounds really clever, so I'll use that. Yeah, in order to move a very heavy weight for a long distance, you need muscular strength, muscular endurance, and power. But that was the one that ChatGPT mentioned. So yes, those three all play a part in sleds, particularly less obviously so in the rest of the race. For example, power, another example, burpees. Again, you don't want to be jumping 15 centimeters forward. You want to be jumping 1 meter to 2 meters forward. So you need power in that respect. And again, I could go on and on, but
is CrossFit a hybrid fitness sport?
Yes. Now,
that's controversial.
It requires a huge amount of strength and a substantial amount of endurance. Now, I listened to a podcast recently where it was saying, I think it was the James Kelly and Anthony Parasini one, hybrid coaching podcast, where they were saying, is CrossFit justified in saying the winner of that are they justifiably known as the fittest on earth? I think it was Anthony who said yes, and James Kelly's argument, or Georgie's argument, his partner, was Ironman or full distance triathletes, and his argument was those would be the fittest on earth. But then if you're talking about Ironmen, they're not strong.
No.
I could, without trying, out bench press, out squat, out deadlift every single one of them. Now, they have a far higher cardiovascular endurance ability than I do, but who's to say how much of each thing you need to incorporate in order to be the fittest on earth, for example? So for CrossFit, the longest event that they had at the 2025 CrossFit Games was 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Can you say that you're the fittest on earth when you've never proven yourself in a time domain longer than an hour? I think yes, purely because I don't see another sport incorporating the variety of fitness components that they do. Sure, cardiovascular endurance isn't a massive component of it, but everything else there is covered in CrossFit to a high standard. So I think if you're taking every hybrid sport and saying which is the closest to being the most legitimate, I would say CrossFit.
And being able to walk on your hands is a key component of hybrid fitness, is it?
Coordination, I'd say it's a pretty high level.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Coordination and massive shoulders. So working against the idea, just for the sake of argument, that CrossFit is kind of like the peak of hybrid fitness, one thing is that you said that they don't do anything beyond 45 minutes. So is that undercooking the endurance side of it? Another thing that you could argue is that with one or two exceptions, they're all short. So there's almost no such thing as a tall CrossFit athlete, which is part of the reason why you at 6'4" went a different direction, because you did CrossFit for a couple of years, you loved it, but some of the movements just don't make sense for you.
Yeah, when I was doing that, first of all, when he says I did CrossFit, I trained at a gym a couple times a week for maybe a year and a half. So it wasn't like I had gotten into any regional competition or anything like that. I took up CrossFit too late. I think CrossFit is one of those sports where if you take it up past a certain age, there's no set number on that, obviously, you can't be one of the best in the world. The reason I say that is because unlike High Rocks, it's a highly skill-based event as well as fitness.
Right.
So I mean, that's a whole different topic. But High Rocks, there isn't a whole lot of specific skills you need to spend years and years and years learning like there is in CrossFit. So for example, ring muscle-ups, handstand walks, mainly every gymnastic component that CrossFit does, you need to build up months and months of practice. Whereas in High Rocks, I wouldn't need to practice High Rocks specific work to be one of the best in the world at it. See Ryland Shadegg. If you guys know who Ryland Shadegg is, his training is almost nothing to do with High Rocks. And yet, because he has a huge and really good baseline of fitness, he is really good at the sport and he's an Elite 15 athlete.
Which presumably means it's relatively easy to cross over from another hybrid event or another sport generally into High Rocks, which we're seeing quite a lot more of in the last year or two, right?
Yeah, which is partly why it's so popular and looking to overtake CrossFit, because you've had CrossFit athletes come into High Rocks, namely James Sprague, 2024 CrossFit champion, who in his first High Rocks did a 102 something, and you've had another CrossFit athlete come into High Rocks and do an hour flat something in his second race. No High Rocks athlete on the planet in the Elite 15 could go over and make that much of a splash into the CrossFit world.
Right.
Apart from Miriam Van Roor. Again, this is going a bit nerdy. If you want to know about Miriam Van Roor, then that's another topic. But you do not have the skill set unless you were prior a CrossFit athlete to go from High Rocks into CrossFit.
So presumably if you see a High Rocks athlete that looks very muscular, they're going to have a tougher time on the runs, but they might have a shot at transitioning into CrossFit if they wanted to.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I've noticed a lot on social media in the last 12 months. High Rocks people saying relatively little about CrossFit, but a lot of CrossFit fans getting really quite upset about High Rocks. And it seems to be a kind of almost a subgenre in its own right of CrossFit people mocking High Rocks as being for useless, skinny people who can't lift anything. So do you fit that category?
Well, I'm moving more towards that category than I did when I started training for High Rocks, yeah. But I think the reason that is happening might partially be because CrossFit, I get mixed up between them completely for some reason now, but CrossFit was the established hybrid sport, and now High Rocks has come into that whole area trying to be the most popular. So I reckon we'd have the same thing if High Rocks was around since 2007, I think, when CrossFit came around, and then CrossFit came in and it's all of a sudden super popular. You'd have them being protective over being the best hybrid sport. But now, because High Rocks is coming into their domain or whatever they want to call it, now CrossFit's getting protective. Because, yeah, I don't know why, but in my opinion, CrossFit is a lot cooler of a spectator sport because the movements are all so much more impressive than High Rocks. Yeah,
I think seeing a 240-pound guy walking down a floor on his hands is disconcertingly impressive. So you would definitely say that CrossFit is a hybrid fitness sport, even though people now wouldn't talk about it like that. They'd say that there's CrossFit, and then there's hybrid fitness, which covers a whole lot of other things that involve lots of running. And I think generally people would say the distinction is that it is mainly running plus some other things, whereas CrossFit is almost entirely no running at all with a little bit of running. So you go to a CrossFit workout, for example, and every time there's a run, you almost hear the groans around the gym. And that run is usually like 400 yards a couple of times. Whereas for High Rocks, you assume half your training. For Deadly Dozen, for Deca, for everything, you assume half your training's running. So is that not what differentiates CrossFit from what we could usefully describe as being hybrid fitness?
I think it is possible to create a sport that could become the essence of hybrid fitness. You could make a sport more tailored to becoming essentially the living definition of hybrid fitness. CrossFit is what I think right now is the closest thing to it. And you say running's not a huge component of it. The first event in the games was a 4-mile run, a 3K row, 2-mile run. Like that's a ninth of how you do at the CrossFit Games, which is essentially the World Championships. A ninth of that is running. If you weren't good at running, you'd place 30th in the event, and that would have a huge impact on the rest of your the rest of the events as well. So running's not the main component, and running is also not the definition of hybrid fitness. Running can play a huge part into an event becoming a good event that defines hybrid fitness, but it is not hybrid fitness. And again, in CrossFit, there is still running in every single games that there have been. Now I can remember.
So CrossFit is hybrid fitness. You've heard it here probably first. And you'll die on that hill, right?
Until another sport comes along that can change my mind. Right now,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. But yeah. So again, you started off by saying that hybrid fitness is a subjective term, but I think you've defined it quite helpfully there.
Yeah.
So you got 10 aspects of fitness, and hybrid fitness combines most or all of them to a high degree. And CrossFit does that arguably more than any other. High rocks and the more recent running heavy ones kind of appeal to a combination of older people, taller people, people who like running. What other kind of person would gravitate to what we now think of as hybrid fitness rather than CrossFit?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I think you kind of covered it. That's not saying, by the way, that short people can't be good at high rocks.
Right.
At all, by the way. I know a couple of people in my age group and a couple of quite elite guys that are quite good and short. Lucas Storath, who is a world champion of high rocks, yes, before it became super popular. You can be good. I would just say overall, if the question was who's better, taller or shorter people, I would say taller athletes in high rocks. But yeah, you're right.
And the opposite for CrossFit. You can be good at CrossFit while being tall, but you can't really be great at it.
Yeah. I don't know how Brent Fikowski and James Sprague do it, to be honest. I really don't.
Impressive guys. Although, it is worth mentioning, as you were saying, how great it was that the previous world champion of CrossFit, James Sprague, did a brilliant high rocks time of 1 hour 2. That is still 2.5 minutes slower than your best time.
And also slower than my first pro time as well. But we won't go into that.
We definitely won't go into the fact that James Sprague is worse at high rocks than you. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's our working definition of hybrid fitness. Next up is a week in workouts. Jude, what have you been doing this week?
This week has been a couple of threshold sessions as always. I think I've done 2 running and 1 erg. So training, if you sort of look at it and that broader term, is the same every week. But I'd say 80-20 rule, 80% easy, 20% hard. And I finished off the week. Well, I have my last workout this evening, but finished off the week yesterday with a full sim that I haven't run since World Champ, so it was kind of interesting to see where I was at with that one.
Full high rock sim, you mean?
Yeah, pro weight.
So when you say what is a sim, what's the difference between doing a high rocks and doing a high rocks sim?
Sim is just emulating the weights, distance, intensity, and everything that you can of the race itself. So I had a setup for me. I had the runs were done on a treadmill, and the 8 runs I did all 1.1k. Because a high rocks event, regardless of how long each lap is or how big the rock zone is, will all equate to 8.7 kilometers. I ended up doing 8.8 kilometers because in a high rocks race, you've got a few turns. So I thought in order to sort of make myself pay a little bit for the lack of turning, so I'm on a treadmill, I just do a little bit extra running. So I did 8.8k on the treadmill. After that, I then go over to these stations, which were usually within 20 to 15 meters of the treadmill. I'd go and do the station, come back to the run station, run, etc.
Okay. And how did it go?
Yeah. Went well. I looked to hold the pace that I'd been recently running in my threshold sessions, and I held it for most of it. So I set off at a 3:44 per kilometer, which is 10 speed, 10 miles an hour on the treadmill. I held that for 5 of my 8 runs, and the last 3 were done at 3:46. So I averaged a 3:44.8 or 9, I think, which
to people who speak in my language is 6-minute miles.
Okay, I didn't know, so thank you. Yeah, so just under 6-minute miles,
which is ridiculous. But carry on.
The main takeaway for me from that session was the fact that each run was 10 seconds per kilometer quicker than when I did my 59:30 pro in Warsaw. Because my main aim from there, and ever since then, has been to improve my running, because it is a weakness of mine, improving that much within, I think, what's it been, not even a year since Warsaw?
It's been 4 months.
Has it? No, not since Warsaw.
That's all it's been.
It's not been 4 months.
He's talking about the High Rocks event in Warsaw where we both did the singles, which was my first High Rocks event, and Jude did a 59:30. It was the first or second week of April.
This isn't me putting it on, but like trying to look at myself like that. I genuinely thought this was about a year ago. 4 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Well done, Ash.
That's another shout
Wow.
out to his running coach.
Yeah. Yeah, so there you go. So that was the biggest run of the biggest win of the session for me. There was a reason that the stations felt quite hard, which
Right.
that being the main
Because
reason
you ran
for
so
it.
hard.
Because yeah,
I think that's one of the things I enjoy with my incredibly limited and low experience of high rocks is the whole tactical element of balancing effort and output. Because one of the things that, you know, when I did marathon running years ago that I felt that I was relatively good at was negative spitz, which is where you run the first half of a race slightly slower than the second half, whereas the natural thing with adrenaline is to go out hard and then cling on for dear life, which is hard to do in a marathon for multiple hours.
which is why your Warsaw splits were so consistent. Is why I think is because of your marathon background.
Right. So I've got, you know, I might be slow like molasses, but I'm consistently slow like molasses rather than slow like sleeping molasses at some point. And
so that,
you know,
that aerobic that aerobic base that everyone talks about with high rocks, you have built. And although you haven't done super high hours in terms of training since you stopped doing marathons, you still have the effect from training for them for so long.
which makes absolutely no sense to me. I understand the words, but the idea that something I did a bunch of years ago is still helping me now doesn't make any sense to me. So we're going to have to dig into that at some point. But thank you. I'm glad that might be helping me because, like I said,
there's your weekly compliment.
What was last week's compliment? The chest genetics. Chest genetics.
That was it. Yes,
which you actually used, by the way, as a basis of a complaint, which was just
it's
bizarre.
never just going to be an all and out compliment. You've got to hide it.
It's a fair point, well made. Okay, so your weekend workouts what's your mileage, your weekly mileage at the moment, running wise?
About 60 kilometers. It's not super high. Like I think this next coming this.
Not super
But again,
high.
whenever I talk about my training, by the way, everyone, I'm comparing myself to the best
James
high rocks
Kelly.
athletes in the world. Yeah. So I mean, but considering he just came off the back of a marathon prep with 120k week.
Yeah.
Anyway, next week it's going to be about 70 to 75 kilometers.
Good
Last
grief.
week was 60 to 65 miles. Is what? 30-ish?
60 is going to be high 30s. Yeah.
High 30s, nearly 40. Yeah.
Yeah. My highest ever weekly mileage during marathon running years ago was 43. That nearly killed me.
I find that surprising because you used to be running a lot.
Yeah, you were a kid when I was doing that.
The difference is, number one, I was a kid, so my perception was kind of skewed.
Exactly.
But also, my running comes in the form of threshold running, long, easy runs, GPP workouts, general physical preparedness, which we'll get into later. My mileage comes from a whole load of different types of workouts, whereas yours was almost pretty much long and slow. So that's why
I did intervals once a week.
Oh, you did?
I did a fast short run once a week. I did a recovery one once a week, a medium run once a week, and then the absolutely dreaded long run every Sunday morning before dawn. Which
that makes sense to me because he used to get up like at 3 a.m. and he used to make me cry, and I was still asleep, so I don't know how that happened. But it's because whenever you worked out, you only ran. Like you didn't do weights, you didn't do anything else. So to me, that's why my perception was that you must have had a huge mileage, which it was for that. Like if I have that mileage at, what were you, 40 something? I'd be happy.
Late 30s to mid 40s.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? What about your
my
work week?
My work week was so I know we mentioned this last week, and it does kind of sound a little bit lame. Is another Zwift race. This one was a 45-minute one. Within my ability band, I came second.
You've raced more than I have this week, so
there we go. Yeah. So I was in the lead group. Then a guy went off the front of the lead group about 20 minutes in, spent about a quarter of an hour on his own, and nobody, because in Zwift nobody works together. Everyone's just trying to hide behind the guy at the front. So in the end, I went out on my own to catch him up. Absolutely blistered myself catching him up, which meant I had nothing left for the sprint at the end, but I was quite happy with second on that. I did the
Sounds like a toxic community to me. Don't sound like very nice people.
Well, you can't talk to them, and every time you look around for someone to share the lead in the peloton so you can catch up to the guy in front, everyone goes, "No, I ain't doing it." It's like, well, we're going to lose to that guy then, and no one cares. So, like, fine.
I don't really know. how you can build a relationship when someone's name has like 8 numbers in it. So
I'm not into Zwift to build relationships. I'm into Zwift to kick people's butt and burn my own butt's calories.
Okay.
So that, the acid bath workout, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then the last kind of heavy workout of the week was a 1,500 meter ski, followed by a 1,500 meter row, followed by a mile run. The problem with that one was I'd just done the acid bath. The other problem
there
with
it
that
is. Absolute fool.
Yeah. The other slight
By
problem.
the way, acid bath is probably the single most painful workout I have ever done in my life. That and a 2K row. And he then tells me 5 minutes after that he's just done that workout. I was...
You weren't impressed. You weren't terribly impressed.
Do not do that.
Were you more or less impressed when I told you that the last element of that was doing a 1 mile run outside at noon in 85-degree heat, which is about 30 degrees in
for
English money?
any of you that haven't run in like serious heat before, you do not understand the amount that it takes out of you on a run.
That was a lot more painful than the acid bath was.
Okay. I don't know about that.
It was 5 times as long, and I was knackered already, so that's probably why that one hurt. So that was my last heavy workout of the week, and I'm not sure yet what next week's programming looks like. One of the elements we want to focus on this podcast, in terms of bringing in together everything that's going to help people with their hybrid fitness, is looking at nutrition. And that will include sometimes recipes or food or something that we want to talk about or recommend. So you've got an overnight oats recipe you want to recommend.
It's nothing revolutionary. And to be honest, nutrition isn't. I don't think you need to make it revolutionary. I don't think you need to come up with any crazy recipes. I think the healthiest people on the planet are the people that keep it simple. So for me, every morning I will wake up and look forward to 300 grams of fat-free yogurt, 100 to 120 grams of oats, depending on what I'm doing that day, 1 banana, honey, and protein powder. That is it. I will put that in a bowl, and I will go to sleep looking forward to waking up and eating that, sometimes with a nice coffee that I make. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's not complicated, and it is very beneficial. Has a large amount of protein, good carbs, really good.
So Greek yogurt?
Yeah. Okay. Fat-free Greek yogurt, 100 to 120 grams of just rolled oats, 50 grams of pure honey, natural honey, 50 grams of protein powder, and sometimes 1 banana.
And what are the macros on that?
It is 117 grams of carbs, 100 grams of protein, 10 grams of fat.
100 grams of protein?
100 grams of protein. That is more than some people claim to be able to fit in a day in one meal.
So your body's absorbing most of that 100 grams?
Yes. The amount that I do in terms of activity, my body will put that to good use. My muscles are torn after every training session I do, because when your muscle fibers contract, they tear. Micro tears in your muscles is how, when they rebuild, you get stronger, etc. Yes. If you train a lot and you do a lot of hard work in the gym, outside the gym, you will use that protein.
So for normal people, perhaps halve the protein powder. You mentioned 50 grams of protein powder, which is almost two scoops, right? Right. So for most of us, we can cut that down to 1 scoop probably.
Yeah, and that's also around 1,000 calories. So, for example, if you're doing weights once a day or training once a day with a sedentary job, for example, just half it. So do 250 grams, 200 grams of yogurt, 50 grams of oats, 20 grams of honey, 20 grams of protein powder, half a banana. And then you get 500 calories with also really good macronutrients.
Okay, cool. So that's our recipe for the week. Our highly flexible, adjustable, agile, skilled,
scalable. Don't RX it if you're cutting. Do not RX that.
Don't RX
recipe.
it if you're cutting. Okay.
No.
Moving swiftly on. Wow. Last week's wow was what? Give us the definition again of that horrendous thing you made us do.
Acid bath, 500 meter ski, 500 meter row, 1,000 meter bike.
How did
you do?
How did I do? Did you not do another one? You're resting on your laurels on that one, were you?
I'm keeping the one that I did 2 weeks ago and probably not doing that again.
I did. I had to use an assault bike, which meant that your assessment of what I should do, which was sub 630, you said slightly went out the window because assault bikes don't have reliable speed indicators. Is that what you were saying?
No. I was saying I don't know them well enough. Like, I could tell you your pacing roundabout on a C2 bike, but on a assault bike, they're different.
Okay. Well, I got on okay. I guess I did a 6:12 overall, so it wasn't terrible.
Very respectable time.
Thank you. The ski erg was better than I thought it would be because I don't like them, and I haven't done. I'd never done ski ergs before, like a month before my first Hyrox event in March, and so the movement to me is a horrible clunky thing that I've got no rhythm in it at all. But I held just over 2 minutes per 500 meters on that, so that was fine. The row I enjoyed because I do feel like I have decent rhythm rowing, so I could do a 155 on that, and then you just on the bike you just hurt yourself till it's over, right? So
yeah, pretty much.
That was
Can't
okay.
really hold back on that one.
No, so I went full send on that, and then collapsed afterwards and submitted it on a quick reel, which looked as bad.
I'm
as
shaking
it
my
felt.
head about the fact that you still did a workout after that. Not after that, but 5 minutes after that.
5 minutes is a very respectable break before doing a 23-minute test. It wasn't even a workout; it was a full test. I had to submit my time to the website to rank myself. Weirdly, I came 4th out of 4 of the people who did it that week, which is
they're lying. Fabricated times.
We did get response. I want to give a shout out to our friend Pat, who got back to us about acid bath. He didn't do it, which is disappointing. Now, I should note here that Pat, you were talking about the great chest genes that you inherited from me, and I inherited them from my dad. But Pat and family, most of them are CrossFit guys and ladies, and they have insane quads. And he mentioned that his son Ben did the acid bath. And what was your time?
Or 59.8.
Which is insane, because Ben did it in 5:04, and Pat said that he vomited afterwards, which I think gives him a 6-second bonus. I think
I'm impressed that I didn't.
I'm unimpressed that you didn't. I think if you haven't vomited, you haven't done it properly. Ben did vomit, 5:04, bonus time of 6 seconds, so he did it in 4:58, really, because he vomited.
So Ben won. Okay,
so Ben won.
You.
Yeah, Ben won by a second, but it was close. Yeah. It was close. So good effort.
Yeah.
Good effort. So that seems
cool.
fair, is what you're about to say.
Yeah.
Next week's WOW is what?
Next week's WOW is a threshold workout on the erg. So you've got 4 1K intervals on the ski with a 50-second rest between them, straight into 4 1K intervals on the row with 50 seconds between them. And the idea is to not do the ski, take a rest, then go into the row. It is to keep that 50-second rest between all 8 total intervals. So 1K on the ski, 50-second rest for 4 intervals, 50-second rest 4 times 1K on the row.
So the 50 seconds rest happens between all 8 segments, but you're doing all the skis followed by all the rows, not alternating between them. Okay, so what do you think you should do on that? And then tell me what you think I should do on that.
I did it again. Oops, I got excited. I did it at race pace, or maybe a bit quicker. Race pace being Hyrox pace, by the way.
So race pace isn't actually the quickest you could do at this
No.
No. Okay. So you
threshold workouts are never meant to be quickest that you could do it.
Right, but you're asking us to do it as quick as we can do it.
No, this is just a good, actually productive threshold workout, not something that you kill yourself on and then can't move for. Well,
so you don't want to know.
I guess.
You don't want to know times, then? Is that what you're saying?
I want to know times, but I want to know times if they were done under the correct intensity.
Okay, so not quite all out. You did it in what time?
Total time I don't know, but the splits are helpful. So my average time on the ski was a 146.5, and then my average time on the row was a 144.5. Those are my 500 splits, by the way.
And what do you think I should do? Let me hang on. Let me recap. As someone who has aged reasonably well, and yet really badly, and could be quite good, but actually isn't, and is overweight and old.
He's not upset about it, though. He's not upset about the comments, so it's fine.
So what should I do? What should my splits be?
I haven't coached you in ages.
I'm just an average 51-year-old guy, Jude. Give me my splits.
Okay. All right. 2, 15, 220 on the ski erg.
Yeah.
and 205 to 210 on the row.
Okay, is that for me or is that for 51-year-olds generally?
You, and then I guess if you're calling yourself average, your words not mine, then we can apply that to every other 51-year-old listening to this. If you're proficient in both ski erg and the row, I'd say your ski would be about 2 seconds per 500 slower, anywhere from 2 to 5.
Okay, so let us know how you got on with your wow before our next episode. I think that's it for this week, Jude, other than wrapping up with the quote of the week. One of my favourite ever sporting quotes, this was the manager, Joe Maddon, the manager of the Chicago Cubs baseball team, before spring training one year. He made T-shirts for the entire squad, and on the front of that T-shirt in huge letters was, "Try not to suck," which I think is one of the best pieces of advice I have ever heard. What do you think?
Wise words. But a cleaner version of what I say in my head to myself when it gets hard in a high rocks race, so it's quite applicable.
Okay, awesome. That's my advice to you this week, is try not to suck. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us.
Awesome.
Next week, we're going to, our main feature will be kind of homing in on high rocks. So we've been talking about hybrid fitness generally and what it means and what it is and what it isn't. Next week, we'll have a more in-depth look at the sport of high rocks, going station by station, what's involved, and a little intro onto how to improve at that. So thanks you again for joining us. I've been Paul Reynolds.
I've been Jude Reynolds.
See you soon. Thank you very much.